Good morning, everybody. We're going to start in just a few minutes. We're letting everybody to join in. Good morning to everybody who are on the West Coast, and absolutely good afternoon, and have a great lunchtime with me today. And if you are on the East Coast as well, really excited to be here in front of all of you guys. This is our first out of series of live events that we're going to host on every third Thursday of the month. Really excited to be able to share insights. We're going to have different topics on every month that we're going to discuss. And if you are interested in what topics we're going to have, you always feel free to check it out on our LinkedIn homepage so that you are able to find the different topics that we're going to discuss every month. Really excited to be here with all of you guys. We are going to start just in a few more seconds. I'd like to start out by really thanking you to join me today for the sessions that we could really fundamentally transform the way you run your business. We're diving into a critical topic of creating a blueprint of success by mapping your end-to-end process before you're scaling. Many of us are having New Year resolutions and goals and KPIs to scale our business in 2025. But as we all know, that scaling doesn't come easy. It actually needs to be methodically scheduled and figuring it out what steps needs to be taken in order for us to be able to scale successfully. So scaling is really exciting, but without the right foundation, it can lead to operational chaos. Today, I will share how mapping your process from procurement to sales can uncover inefficiencies, align your workflow with growth goals, and set up the sustainable success. We're going to talk about and help to identify inefficiencies in the current workflow. We're going to discuss how to do a process mapping and framework for success to set it up. We're also going to look at actionable insights to align process with the growth. I'm going to give you some real life example from one of our clients that scaled recently from 15 million to 25 million and what we did in order for them to scale successfully. We're also going to look at some tools and techniques for you guys to get started, and really going to want to share some of really exciting news. Again, this is not a sales call whatsoever, so don't rush to drop it off at the very end. This is really more about me sharing my insights of what I know with you guys so that you could be able to succeed with your business. But let's start with conversation of why trust me in the first place on this topic, and why am I here to speaking with you guys? Well, one of the first reasons I would like to introduce myself, and my name is Evgenia Alexandrovna Yushkova, or simply Yay. I'm a fashion business consultant with over 22 years of experience, helping retail and manufacturing consumer brands unlock their growth potential, whether it's building through a private label or optimizing their existing processes. Over the course of my career, I have worked with businesses ranging from emerging startups to established multi-million retail companies, building their private label from concept to customer and guiding them to scale sustainably and profitably. I've always been passionate about creating systems that empower businesses to succeed. Scaling isn't just about doing more. It's about doing a smart with the right foundation in place. I've seen firsthand how a lack of streamlined processes can lead to bottlenecks, merging rigorously, and missed opportunities. We really need to think about how we're going to be able to scale so that we can be able to actually sustain and not overstrain our resources. And that's what I would really here to help you guys to decide and determine. My mission is to help businesses like yours to avoid those pitfalls and build a framework to long-term success. What sets me apart is my hands-on experience in both retail and manufacturing. I have led teams responsible for designing, sourcing, developing private labels that generate millions of revenue. I've also developed an end-to-end strategies that have improved margins by 20% for a lot of our clients. My approach is practical, proven, and focused on real results. Today, I'm excited to share the proven framework for mapping your end-to-end process as a critical step for businesses ready to scale. Let's dive in. And thank you guys for leaving the comments. I'm really excited. Please do so. I'm going to try to answer as many questions as I can on the call. I will also be able to follow up with you guys after. So please feel free to also leave me your email and the name so that I could be able to know how to get in touch with you guys as well. But let's start first with the, identifying the inefficiencies in the current workflow. And one of the first things I wanted to talk about is how do we find the hidden cost of inefficiencies, right? Most of the business have inefficiencies that silently drain resources and margins. This could be misaligned procurement timelines or production delays or sales forecasting errors. One of the examples I'd love to give is where if you imagine your team spends hours reconciling orders across different systems. Not only it's inefficient, but it's also error prone. And you'll be surprised how many companies out there have built system over system by trying to meet the demand and their rapidly growth without actually taking a step back and making sure that everything is well connected and the data actually flows from one department to the other, from one system to the other, and builds up like a snowball, where we actually find there's still a lot of redundancies happening. A lot of manual work of emailing, waiting for those emails to come in, entering them to a specific system, then be able to manually transfer that to another system. I mean, it's a chaos out there, which is surprising to me. So hopefully that's not happening in your business. But if it is, definitely we're going to be addressing it here as well a little bit today. But one of those really important things to really highlight is thinking about how can we review our key metrics, like lead time, error rates, inventory turns. Those would be our really great indicators where to understand where there potentially could be inefficiencies. Looking for recurring issues, like whether it's a missed deadlines or our highly crunched rates and bottlenecks. Thinking about where you're consistently team coming into you or you consistently hearing frustrations from the team, that could be a potentially as well a red flag of inefficiencies and potentially the current issues that really gets to the team. And if they are not addressed, or if they are addressed on the surface of just addressing the symptom, but not the root cause of it, which is eliminates those redundancies, it consistently can get really frustrating for buyers. It can get really frustrating for their logistical warehouses, and especially when they're completely misaligned. So thinking about that and kind of discovering it, surveying your team or talking to your team would be one of the best ways to kind of identify those inefficiencies. Ask your team where they experience frustrations or delays. One of the best tool that I find in this particular process of kind of defining or understanding where you really need to focus your optimization, right, before you actually going to ready to be scaled, is to potentially held what I've called Kaizens. And Kaizens really is a 3 to 4, 6 hour meeting or a session that we can, for the lack of a better word, and where we can bring in not just the heads of cross departments, but I always recommend, and it's really critical to bring the actual process users. So people who are actually behind the scenes using the systems, using the process, and hear it from them. What are the frustrations? What are the issues? Where are they experiencing bottlenecks? Putting all of that on paper, I love to imagine a big whiteboard with lots of sticky notes, divided by each different department swim lane, and have them really come into the wall and stick their issues that they're seeing. Then categorizing them because you're going to find out that a lot of the issues will actually fall into certain categories. So categorizing them and prioritizing them would be an absolute important way to then be able to address it from kind of stepping back and addressing them through your end-to-end process. I'm getting a really interesting question right now. How do you balance to identify inefficiencies without slowing down your ongoing operations? I mean, great question, because we constantly think, well, how do we do this while we don't disrupt what we already have to do day to day? Everybody's moving at 100 miles an hour. I get it. So it's one of the things is to start with small, non-disruptive audits, like in key areas to check on lead times and error rates. Focus on data first. So don't try to jump in and solve the problem. First, collect the data, understand where is truly the root cause of this problem, and involve the team members to ensure to continuously improve without interrupting daily workflow. Continuous improvement is not something that you do one time. It's something that is culturally needs to be adapted by your team, and from the top management all the way down to everybody who is working underneath each department, to be able to really think about where can we improve continuously, where we can find inefficiencies, whether potentially they could be solved through a Kaizen session where you can find the root cause immediately and come up with a solution. And sometimes we need to take a little bit of a step back and really understand where this delay is happening in your end-to-end process overall. But I'm getting another really great question. Thank you for asking those questions. Please have them keep coming, because they're really exciting. It makes this conversation much more insightful for everyone. How can I get honest feedback from the team about inefficiencies? It's very true. A lot of team members would be afraid to speak up. So number one, you got to think to yourself, what kind of a culture do I have in my organization? Am I promoting a collaborative approach? Am I promoting for people to actually speak up and reward them for the fact that they're actually speaking up? Create a safe space for feedback to ensuring anonymity of surveys, or hosting an open sessions even where the team members feel that they're heard and that they're valued. This needs to happen often, and surprisingly, especially in our industry, and maybe potentially because we're moving at 100 miles an hour, we underlook that. And then later on, we have a lot of snowball effect of all these inefficiencies. And now we really have to take a pause and try to address it. So from thinking about, how do you be able to get some of the continuous improvement methodology and into your culture and integrate that into your culture, that would be another really great way of always understanding and seeing what the inefficiencies are and how to be able to address them. And having the team being comfortable to actually speak up. They have to make sure that they feel that they are being heard. That's why those Kaizens are really important, and really important to be able to really do that with your team on a regular basis. Another great question just came in. What if the inefficiencies seem minor? Like, are they worth even addressing? Absolutely. Small inefficiencies add up over time, especially when you're scaling. Eliminating now prevents you from becoming significant bottlenecks later. So it's really important, like I said, really getting the continuous improvement mentality within your teams and promoting that so that you can address small inefficiencies, as they come in, versus waiting and getting them done over time as a big problem. One of the second thing I want us to kind of really focus on there is to really talk about the process mapping framework, right? So thinking about visualizing the gaps, overlaps, and bottlenecks. So a lot of time I talk to business owners, and here's what I often hear. We are ready to scale, and we identified we are missing a PLM system, and we are now implementing a PLM system. The next question I ask, do you have your end-to-end process mapped out and optimized before you're introducing and implementing a system? 95% of the time, the answer is no. And some of the times I do get an answer, yes, we do have it. We are having our teams right now create SOPs for everything that they do. One thing that we're realizing, process mapping is very different from creating SOPs. SOPs typically come in after you develop a process map and optimize your process so that now you can capture your standard operating procedures based on what your optimal process is. And only then you are now ready to implement the system, because the system has to sit on top of your optimized process. If you are bringing in the system and start implementing while your process is not even defined, then you are missing out on opportunities for that system to solve some of your bottlenecks and help you to automate, and clearly seeing which areas it will need to really kick in to automate certain steps and make it more efficient. But it also often leads to failure of implementation, because that adds on a really big chunk of time and effort on your team to implement a system. But if they implement in the system on already inefficient process, they're not seeing the reason why we need another big thing for us to be able to learn, and it's going to make our job and life harder, right? So one of the great ways of doing this is when you get those teams involved, you get to the end-to-end processes, you get them to optimize it, and now they get to see all these inefficiencies that now you are able to solve with the system that allows you to automate. And then it's like a light bulb turns on. Everybody now jumps on board, because everybody wants to be efficient. Everybody wants to eliminate all these gazillions of emails back and forth, right? And have a potentially dashboard that will give them everything they need to know, or potentially have a vendor portal where they can communicate with their vendors instead of in tracking every step of the way of your product development or production, instead of doing a lot of this manual work back and forth. First of all, we want to, before we start creating a kind of overview of this end-to-end process map, which is super critical, is really we need to define what our scope is, right? We need to really identify the process where it starts and where it ends. For example, it starts at procurement and to the final delivery. If you are a manufacturer of the brand, you even start earlier than procurement. You're actually starting at the idea and design phase, all the way to the end consumer and logistics. So identifying the key key points first of every touch point, then diving into actual process of what it takes, who is involved, and how we're going to be able to really take a step back and see each touch points within each department, and then how do they connect together, right? How that information flows. Now, the next thing to really think about is really going to be important before you're making any type of adjustments, is to start gathering data, right? Documenting workflows by speaking with your team members on every stage. Looking at handoff points between teams and systems, very critical. Measuring how long it actually takes. Not necessarily a team member will come in and says, well, it takes me anywhere from 10 to 20, 30 minutes. Well, is it really 10, or is it 10, 15, or is it really 30? You got to measure it. So send them and actually have them measure how long it really takes, so that you guys can capture that as part of your process map evaluation later on. Now we're ready to, now as we got everything together, all the pieces, and potentially you've done that during that Kaizen on the whiteboard with your sticky notes. Now we're ready to really create that process map, right? And the process map is really uses as a visual tool. And what we really recommend in this case, to do it by swim lane diagram, to capturing every task, responsibility, and timeline, and how everything interacts and flows. The next thing we wanted to look at is how we analyze that map. So now that we have captured the existing process, very critical to be honest with yourself, do not miss any steps. And even if it feels inefficient and daunting, capture it. Capture every single step that you can possibly can, so that you can really get a holistic view when you are ready to analyze it. Now, when we start to analyze it, here's what we need to look at. First, we want to highlight the gaps, which would be the missing steps or unclear responsibilities, or potentially where there is a disconnect between the hands-off, right? Hands-off, look for where most of the delays are, especially. If there's anything that's a manual handoff of information by email, definitely you want to highlight that as a gap as well. Then you want to look at where the things overlap. Where are you looking for duplicate efforts between the departments? So, and making sure that you're highlighting those as well, because that would be another great long-hanging fruit of opportunity for us to be able to address this particular optimization process. Then we want to identify bottlenecks, right? So steps that consistently delay the process. It's going to be very critical here as well. Once we identified all of those things, then we want to analyze based on value-driven, non-value-driven, and essentials. Now, what does that mean? You always have to think of end customer in mind. So when you think of end customer in mind, number one thing you want to think about and ask yourself, is this step in the process actually gives the value to my end consumer, right? Where does that make my shipment go faster? Does this impact on what type of products we're able to bring in and at what rate and speed? How quickly we're able to, add this product, for example, onto your e-commerce sites. How is that going to then work with the warehouse, and how quickly we'll be able to get this product to the actual customer hands, or even potentially going down to how is it being packaged, right? All of those things adds to the value to the customer. So we want to mark those as value added steps. And those are the ones you want to keep. And those are the ones are going to be very critical to make sure that they seamlessly work with each other. Then you want to look at what's essential. Some of our manufacturers and retails have to deal with a lot of regulations. So some of the steps that we even potentially don't really want to take is maybe extra audits or potentially gathering certificates from our vendors. They might seem daunting tasks, but it's required. It's required by law. It's required by some sort of a compliance. So those you want to mark them essentials, because unfortunately there's nothing you can do with them, but you want to make sure, again, they're integrated really well with your value added steps, that everything flows seamlessly together. The next thing you want to really think about, what is the really non-value added steps, which could be those emails or handoffs or manual handoffs or overlapped processes that you are doing. All of those are going to be non-value. So mark them as non-value, and the way you can mark them in the systems that we are going to talk about a little bit later is you can do them in different colors. One could be green, one could be yellow, and one could be red. So marking those, outlining those boxes in those colors. Now that you have everything evaluated, that's when the fun begins. Now, remember, optimizing a process can never be done in a silo. It should never be done by just one department, and also it should never be done by just one or two people in your organization. It has to be done with the same people that you actually help you to map out this process, which involves key stakeholders like your managing team, but very importantly, the process users itself. Because if you're doing it just on the management side, it'll be very difficult to get a buy-in from the actual process users who are going to adopt this process later on. Involve them from the day one in this particular process. Now, they are going to help you now to take everything that's non-value essential. You're going to take it out of your process. Once you take out of your process, the next thing you really want to do is to see what's left. And that's when it becomes like a puzzle piece. I mean, we all love collecting puzzles, don't we? And sometimes you're trying to look for that piece where it matches so that it actually comes together. Well, it's the same exact way. So now you are redefining your process with the boxes that are left. You are going to now redraw it, reframe it, and making sure that no duplication is happening, at the same time that it seamlessly flows from one handoff, one department to the other. Also taking into account what the team is telling you, right? Because they might be saying, hey, I know that this is how we used to do it, but maybe there is a better way. So constantly ask, maybe there is a better way. And when if somebody is being very persistent, or potentially you are having a step that's persistently there, but you know that it's inefficient, then ask yourself and your team the 5 whys. Why are we doing this? And then once you get the answer to why are we doing this, ask yourself again, why? Why is that happening? Until you really get to the bottom of the root cause of that particular inefficiency or step. And then you're going to be able to find other ways of how you can be able to optimize it. So thinking about those critical points is very important. And I really hope that this is going to help you prompt some ideas of what you're going to do, with your own teams and how you're going to build some of those processes. Great questions that are coming in. Thank you, everyone, for bringing this into. It's really fantastic to hear. And one of the great questions I just got: what is the best way to gather accurate data from mapping? Fantastic questions, right? Conduct interviews with your key stakeholders and cross-reference them with their input, with the performance data, ensuring the accuracy, making sure that anything that is being told is actually measured. If it's not measured with data, then it's really all about the gut feeling, or potentially someone is frustrated and then now it's overly exaggerated or potentially underlooked. So making sure that you consistently measure it, it's very important. Great question that just came in again. How often should I revisit and update my process maps? Fantastic question. We often create a process map if we build a business in the first place, and then we forget about it. We kind of store it in the closet, and then the next thing we remember it maybe years down the road. Actually, the process maps that you're creating needs to be reviewed 6 to 12 months or anytime you're trying to implement a significant change. For example, like a system, or when you are trying to meet your scaling efforts. So please, when you are planning to implement a system, that's really critical. Make sure you go back to your end-to-end process first and make sure that it's actually working and optimized before you're going to decide on which system you're going to use and how you're going to implement it, because that's going to make or break your implementation process. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the actionable insights of our process and how we can grow for our growth of our goals. One of the things that we've talked about already is the eliminating non-value activities. One of the great examples I also would like to give is a client realizes that their approval process was taking 2 weeks. By streamlining that process itself, they were able to reduce it to 2 days, because once they actually laid out that process, they realized that there were so many non-value added steps like manual handoffs. So when we were able to actually take all of that out, there was literally 4 steps left. And we just had to create the bridges to be able to help them automate this communication process. And all of a sudden, that no longer takes 2 weeks, because a lot of times why it takes so long is because people are waiting for responses and people are not sure if there is something sitting in their inbox that's already a mile long. So thinking about those inefficiencies and getting all those non-value added steps out of it will really help you to shorten your productions, procurements, or anything that you're working on that you're trying to optimize. Think about focusing on scalability, right? So once we build the workflow that you are now happy with, that would be really important to also think about, now, what we just optimized, is it scalable, right? And if it's not scalable, because, for example, there are still a lot of manual spreadsheets that are going around within your process, then that's going to be a great opportunity for you to think, okay, now how can I optimize it? Where can I be able to automate? Which system I'm potentially missing? And then be able to start, implementing and integrating that, so that when you do have a great foundation, so when you're ready to scale to the next step again, you are going to be ready to scale versus, again, trying to scrap for it at the last step. When you start to optimize or implement systems at the time when you're already growing, then you're doing it too late. You got to be ready for your growth, right? So if today you are projecting that you're going to grow from 10 million to 20 million, from 100 million to 250 million, it doesn't matter. You got to be prepared. And processes, systems is what's going to help you to have a foundation that will allow you to actually scale. The next thing I was really think about, which is often really missed, is to really enhance the collaboration. Use the shared dashboards to give people a visibility on your team, so that it has transparency into the progress, into priorities. So a lot of times, again, we are so much manual work that we don't even know what our priorities really are. And there's no way for us to visually glance at it in the morning when we come in, or in the evening when we leave the building. So those are going to be the tools that you need to think about. How can you give the most transparency to your team? How are you going to be able to really minimize those inefficiencies so that they can succeed? Keep your growth goals, front and center as you're reworking the process. Really important, ask yourself, will this support us when we do a 2x, right? When we grow at 3x, of our current sales scale. If it does support you, that's great. Then you've done a great job. But if there is still some hesitations, and again, this is not something that you're going to answer yourself, or maybe with just your operation manager, you have to actually do this with and cross-functional teams and ask this question to yourself. Did we create a process that will allow us to double our sales or triple our sales, or do we still feel like there's going to be inefficiencies once that workflow will come in once we start doubling it up? The next thing to really think about is, thank you. Before I move on, here's another great question just came in. What are the common mistakes businesses make when aligning process with growth goals? Great question. Overcomplicating workflows, neglecting team input, and failing to invest in scaling tools. This would be probably one of the biggest misses that we're seeing across all of our clients. So something for us to really think about and be honest with yourself if this is happening in your organization, because a lot of times we just don't want to look that way because it is difficult to admit that this is happening. Great question just came in again. How do you maintain collaboration across departments when scaling? Fantastic question. Like we've talked about in the past, continuous improvement mentality. This would be one way of doing it. Promoting a collaborative approach, right? Using the centralized communication platforms and establish clear accountability for cross-department tasks. A lot of times we do our task in a silo and we pass it on to the next department and it's no longer our problem. Well, if we foster the culture of, hey, we want to keep accountable our next department, and the previous department will keep us accountable, then everyone's going to work together. I always think it's like you have to imagine that you are in a boat and you have to row in the same direction. Because if you are in a boat and half of the boat is rowing in one direction and the other one rowing in another direction, or one of some of them say, well, it's not my problem, I just won't even row, what are you going to do? You're going to sink. So you got to think about your organization as a ship that is, and all the people in that ship has to row in the same direction. So one of the next things that I really want to share with you guys before our time is up is a real life example of one of our clients that we have worked recently. Now, majority of our clients are all under NDA, so I'm not allowed to share, who it really is. But I'd love to kind of share their story a bit. It's a mid-sized retailer that was struggling with missed sales opportunities due to the inventory mismatch and delays in product launches. So they came to us really thinking about how do we able to do this, because they were overwhelmed. They were trying to implement the system at the same time. And they were trying to understand how do they make sure that they succeed and do it in a very rapid time. So one of the first thing I've asked the person that we have worked with in our organization is, have you guys mapped your end-to-end process and identified where your bottlenecks are? The answer was, we were doing SOPs. I said, what SOPs don't matter in this case. We need to understand what your real process is. So what the first thing we did is we sat down with them and we mapped with their team and we mapped out their complete process. We then realized that there were many bottlenecks in their procurement timelines, which were a lot of it handoffs, manual, and waiting for emailing the PO to the vendor, waiting for the vendor to confirm that there is a PO. I mean, it was a nightmare. So one of the first things that we identified is creating a vendor portal for them that allowed them to be able to control everything and all the orders that are going out. With one click, the vendor would be able to accept the order and confirm it. The vendor didn't have to wait for email any longer because it was all in their dashboard. So we had vendors coming in and as well as the buyers coming in into the same portal. That alone just removed a lot of their bottlenecks of missing the information. And the biggest one in retailers as well is when we have buyers are chasing for answers from the manufacturers or from the vendors that they're buying it from, which again ties up their time in chasing versus actually them looking and finding new products and opportunities to grow your sales, right? So also thinking about where your resources are truly spent. Then we found, which we identified, the communication gaps between the merchandising and production. That was another big thing that we've realized, that once the merchandising team from their private label perspective sent the orders into production, the way that the production community back to merchandising team, whether it was delays or whether there were going to be some things that they're not potentially be able to produce the way that or something has to change, it always, that communication missed through the cracks. And so the buyers would only find out that something is actually not going to hit their stores on time literally a week before it was supposed to hit. That's way too late for them to react. So once we created this communication tools, and then we actually implemented a PLM system for them, in which now gave a complete visibility to merchants and the buying team to where the production cycle is for every PO, for every style, for every order that they created. Now that allowed them to be able to remove that inefficiency and gaps, because now the buyers were actually flagged and they could see at any day and time exactly where the order is and with what stage of the production it is. And if there was a delay, there was a system, the way it was configured, it would send out all of this communication red flags to everybody who needed to know, starting from merchants all the way to marketing team, so that they knew that they need to do a pivot, right? Whether they need to find a different SKU to be able to replace for those things that are going to be late, or they potentially might want to reconfigure it and then put more units towards something else. So those are the things that are really critical to look at, and really you'll be surprised how often this actually gets underlooked. In the result, we redesigned the workflow, and which reduced their lead times altogether by 30%. I mean, can you imagine this? Which increased their sales through rates and contributed to almost their 10 million revenue jump in 18 months. I mean, this is the things that we are leaving under the table when we do not know what our end-to-end process really looks like, and we're not granularly looking at it with our teams. With clear process map, they didn't just fix the issue, they unlocked the growth potential, because now they were able to release a lot of those resources that were doing this nonsense work. And those resources now were able to actually focus on their job that they do really well, which now they were able to find better product. They were able to actually bring the product and make it live faster. And they were not having issues. If there was something delayed, they were not caught by surprise, and they had to scramble of how do they now solve this issue. So which released a lot of stress from their teams as well. Really critical and very important. Great question that just came in. Thank you again. Thank you everyone for sending your questions. I love when they're coming in. Please do so. Again, I'd like to make this as collaborative as possible. Great question. What was the biggest challenge in implementing and the redesigned workflow? Getting buy-in from all the teams was probably one of the first challenge, because this particular retailer, their culture overall was where each department was working in a silo. And every time one department would complain about an issue, everybody would take it offensively and be like, no, it's not our fault, it's somebody else's. Everybody loves to point fingers. So one of the first things has really helped us to open up with this Kaizen exercises is to really bring this environment to more of a collaborative approach to be able to solve the different issues that we are able to address, and be able to say that it's actually an open end table. There's no blaming of anybody. It's nobody's fault. It's really about how do we put everything that's inefficient together and figuring it out as a team, how to make this work, right? We address this by showing the measurable benefits as well, and involving the team process, the team members that actually use the process from the very start. So that's really important, really important. Now, when we talked about the measurable benefits, this is where, if you remember the beginning of our conversation that I've mentioned, if we are creating a process or implementing a system, and then we say to our team, hey, we did this, now you got to use it. Well, again, they're going to take this as, oh my gosh, this is another thing I got to learn. This is another thing. You're going to get so much resistance. But if you get them involved and they see all the inefficiencies, and then you say, here's the tools that we can be able to solve those inefficiencies with, they will be on board, because everybody wants to work efficiently as much as possible. Nobody wants to do redundant work. Another great question that came in, can a small business apply similar strategies? Absolutely. The principles are the same, whether you are starting up or whether you are a billion-dollar company. The principle is always the same, but they can scale down to fit it to their resources and needs. Especially if you're a smaller company, you probably might not have a lot of big systems that you're implementing just yet, but you are probably still, operating from Excel sheets and manual work orders or whatever it is. And so, but that still could be an option of us to create an end-to-end process that's efficient, that is template driven, so that you don't create every time new spreadsheets or whatever it is. So creating templates, creating SQLs, creating inquiries, so that you'll be able to put all that data in and then analyze it. So, I mean, there's different ways of doing it, even if you're just starting up. And if you are just starting up and have not even done anything, you're just starting a business, then you got to design your end-to-end process with efficiency in mind. So that's the other biggest thing. We jump as entrepreneurs often into, well, let me create a product and let me put it, invest in production and let me now put it on the e-commerce and hope it will sell. But we underlook the actual process that needs to take from the beginning of when that design actually idea comes in, all the way how that's going to get to your customer. So thinking about from the day one, your foundational end-to-end process, and then as you grow, continuously revisit, continuously refine. It's not one time and done deal. You constantly have to nurture it and make it better and better, right? I always like to think of an AI analogy. AI gets smarter over time. Same thing, your process, end-to-end process gets better over time as you are giving it attention with your team and continue perfecting it. What are some of the tools that we can be able to use to create visual mapping? So, a couple of the tools that I really like to use and our team uses is Lucidchart is one of them. It's really user-friendly. It's great. It's a great visual way of doing your process mapping, very easy. Miro is another great tool. It really helps you to do collaborations. So especially if you are a team that is remote, you can do those Kaizens remote as well. So Miro would be, I think, a great tool to do this in. Microsoft Visio is a little bit more advanced capabilities, and I think I would suggest that for larger teams. So if you are just starting up on a smaller team, then I probably use Miro or Lucidchart. But if you are a big team or big corporation or big retailer who have a lot of moving parts, I probably would look at Microsoft Visio for that as a tool. And start with a pen and paper to outline your basics, or a whiteboard with sticky notes. I know this is it takes us, as my young daughter often says, it takes you, Mom, you ancient, in your ancient times. So, but it works because it still allows you to have it as a draft. You can quickly manipulate, whether it's on paper, whether it's on whiteboard with the sticky notes. It becomes very collaborative. It's nothing that is set and done. Then also look at swim lane diagrams, right? It's to creating your roles and handoffs. So not just mapping out the process by department, but also putting into swim lanes and see how they interact with each other. And engage your team for feedback, right? Which their insights is invaluable. So make sure that they know that. Constantly promote that on every of your meetings. Start with that your feedback, your insights is valuable. We want to hear them. We want you to speak up. Promote your team to start speaking up. Great question that just came in. How do I choose the right process mapping software for my business? So like, as I mentioned to you, consider your team size, your budget, the technical experiences overall. Lucidchart is great for like simplicity, while Visio offers advanced features for more complex workflows. So I'd say just looking at some of those tools as well. Of course, if you're going to hire a team who can help you kind of to do this, they'll bring in their set of tools that they like to work with. But then I would really consider based on all of these different factors before you're going to decide which platform you want to use to create this. One of the great questions just came in, are any of these tools are free and available for process mapping? Absolutely. There's a tool that's called Google Drawing. That one is a free one. There are a few others that offer basic process mapping function, and they are free. However, also for softwares like Lucidchart, they're very inexpensive. So it's worth to investing them, getting done what you need to do what you need to do so that you could be able to be efficient with your work. What is the most important factor when using this tool? Someone just asked, clearly to ensure the map is easy to understand by all stakeholders and accurately reflects the process. Now, if you've done this in a silo, or maybe the two people in your team actually, or overall operations team created it and then passed it on to the team, most likely it's just going to be another document to look at, which most likely no one will look. So, but if you've done this in a collaborative way that we just discussed, then they will not only understand what it is, but also you will be able to make sure that it's the accurate process. So when you even optimize your process, whether you want to make sure that you validate that again with your team. And before you roll out your optimized process, please test it. Test it in a small version first to see if it's actually working the way that you intended to work. Because those little tests will help you to, fine tune before you do a big implementation of your process and then have everybody SOP everything, and then you go into trainings. So, and really important when you do implement your process, please make sure you put some control points in place, because it's going to be very critical for us to do so as well, so that you can keep your process in control and that you can see where at any time, if it goes out of control, you'll be able to address it ahead of time. So it was a great hour that 45 minutes that we spent together. We've covered a lot today, right? We've covered how to identify inefficiencies, how to do a map processing, how to align workflow with the goals, and leverage tools to set the businesses up for scalable success. So are you guys ready to take to the next step? I mean, I'm excited with you. I'm excited to also invite you to our process map intensive workshop that will be hosted early February, which will include, all you need to know on how to create a customized process map tailored to your business, what tools immediately to identify improvement areas. It will also include a one-on-one consulting to kickstart your scaling strategy. So if seats are limited in these workshops that we do. So if you are interested, please leave your name and email in the comments, and then also write the word here, sign me up now, so that we will follow up with you with all the details, so that where you could be able to register and secure your spot. For anyone who is on this call today, we'll leave the comment below. We are going to also send you guys a promo code, which will reduce the fee of this workshop from $2,400 to $997 only. So this would be an absolute great opportunity. So, go ahead and do so. We'll be happy to follow up back with you guys and offer you this extended discount, as well as giving you all the details of when and how it's going to happen. If anybody wants to talk to me or needs to get hold of me, please also know that there is going to be a link that we're going to put a link right now into a chat that you could be able to grab and book a call with me, completely complimentary. I'd love to do a discovery calls, look at your strategies, help give you guys some roadmaps and ideas, so that hopefully, to set you guys up for success, whether you work with me or anybody else. It's important that we help you guys to see what needs to be done, and how it needs to be done, so that you can make a decision how you're going to do this, whether you're going to do this internally or hire a professional to help. So I am dropping a link in the chat right now. My assistant also has been kind of sending out some of the messages to you guys with some of those links. So feel free to book, feel free to reach out, leave comments. If you are listening to this live recording after the live sessions has passed, Please leave your comments. I do read them. I do try to reply to every single one of them. I'd love for everybody to be in this network. I'm really excited for you guys to come on next of our session, which is going to be in February, the third Thursday of the month. We do host it at 10 o'clock in the morning Pacific Standard Time. Now, if you think there's a better time, please do also add a comment and let me know, because we are testing this out. We just started this year, this series of workshops, and we are going to test which times would be most efficient for everyone so that we can give the maximum benefit to everyone who is listening to this. Thank you so much for following us. Really excited. Thank you, and I'll speak to you guys next time.